Hey everybody, it's JJ. We're back again for another ASUS PCDIY live stream. Hopefully everybody's doing pretty good here. Let me actually go ahead and make sure that we have everything registering on this side of the fence. So let me go ahead and bring this up. And thanks guys for joining us. So this is a little bit of an ad hoc stream. We're just going to be doing a little bit of a kind of a community AMA session, just be able to go ahead and see if we've got any people from our PCDIY Heartbeat community joining us, hopefully to be able to see if they might have any questions on recent product announcements, features, functions, designs, things along those lines that we do. Of course, those of you that might be seeing us on some of the other actually social channels that we're actually streaming it out to, whether it might be on X or it might be on Facebook or whatever it might be, feel free to go ahead and drop your questions or commentary in the chat as well. I'll go ahead and see if I can go ahead and get to those as well as we go ahead and have those questions. And thank you for joining us. As always, I always like to let anybody know if you're joining us for anything related maybe to kind of service and support or questions on that side, I'd always recommend make sure to reach out to our corresponding service and support team via the corresponding channels that we have, whether it's going to be a contact phone number, email. I really actually like using the My ASUS app. It's actually, I think, a little bit underutilized. Great way to be able to check on everything from service and support tickets and actually open up things to be able to go ahead and look into those related items. So let's go ahead and actually see who we have joining us here on today's stream. We've got, looks like Peter's joining us, Joshua's joining us, Ken. So Ken looks like you might have some questions regarding on an ROG laptop. I'd say for anything on the laptop related side, because on these PCDIY hardware streams, we actually focus on our core components. So that's going to be things like motherboards, graphics cards, monitors, peripherals, gaming gear, any of those kind of related items. We don't generally cover system related products. So that's going to be things like our laptops, our phones, gaming handhelds, systems, and things along those lines. But if you definitely have any questions or comments or anything along those side, feel free to go ahead and reach out to, like I said, our service and support team, or like I said, make sure to check out maybe the ASUS Router app. If you're looking for maybe more information and you want to go through an alternative, I recommend you can also reach out to our PCDIY team at pcdiy@asus.com, and then we can see if we can relay you to maybe the correct point of contact if you have more questions on that side. But on this stream, I generally only focus on component-based hardwares. Okay. Let's see here. See, Joshua, so you were asking about, I think, some of the recent announcements regarding in terms of actually in some of the vulnerability issues that have been noted in terms of a recent notice. So we will actually right now working in coordination with our headquarters team on updated information on that side. So we'll be highlighting that a little more deeply with some more information in the coming weeks. So make sure to go ahead and keep tuned to that. We also actually have a dedicated security advisory webpage. I'm going to go ahead and drop that actually in the chat here. So let me go ahead and drop that in the chat for you. And that's actually a great way to be able to see actually any of the advisory notifications that we release across a myriad of our different software ecosystems and firmware ecosystems. So if you actually check out that site, you'll be able to find out information, but we also have real-time notification indexing that we provide via individuals that have actually signed up with our email. So if you sign up to the email, you'll actually receive actually notifications as well to be able to prompt you on that, whether it's going to be, like I said, security notices or maybe important firmware updates or things along those lines. But specific to security-based issues, those are actually noted there on the security advisory page. So I'd recommend you check that out for the kind of the most up-to-date information. Litecoin, the GPU doesn't look straight. It's actually straight. It's definitely, there's no issues on that side. I mean, definitely with a larger base graphics card, you might want to actually account for having some type of kind of a compensation brace, or let's say some type of anti-sag based solution. But in this one, actually, I do have one in there. It's a small actually standoff that's already there in the back. One of the things that kind of maybe make it look a little bit different though is that this chassis actually uses an angled design at the base to allow you to have a little bit more visibility for the actual base fans if you're going to have inside that there. In terms of though the chassis, this is actually a really nice chassis. I'm a big fan of it for not only the price point, but actually its more compact design profile. Most panoramic chassis are going to be dual chamber nation. This is actually our A31. One of the cool things about the A31 is that you can support both BTF configurations and non-BTF. So BTF is going to be for essentially motherboards where we have the cables on the back of the motherboard, as opposed to where you would have them on the front. Although in this system, you really don't really see the cables almost visible really that much. I mean, you've got the 24 pin over there, and you've got, of course, your EPS right there. And of course, you have one right there for the primary graphics card power. But overall, it's a pretty clean and minimal build. But I like the more compact nature of this chassis as opposed to a larger, I'd say, panoramic chassis that might be a dual chamber or something like our GT302. So I don't know, does anybody have a preference here? Do they favor a wider chassis, or that gives you maybe more rear kind of cabinet space? Because here I can have pretty good cable management, even though, again, you're never really going to see the rear, so you don't really have to worry about that. Or would you favor, like I said, the more compact profile? So this is a little bit of a departure, like I said, from I think the more standard kind of broader type of chassis that are on the market. If we go ahead and let me bring this up, let me see. We can bring up a reference here. And again, here we're going to keep it pretty loose. We don't have any immediate products that we're going to be talking about, but let's go ahead and take a look at something like a traditional panoramic-based chassis design. So this would be panoramic-based chassis. So this is like our GT502 Horizon that we recently launched. So this is going to be a more traditional kind of dual chamber-based design, which is really nice, bold and bright, just like this actually, where you have a panoramic-based design. There's no brace in the front, in the very front part of the chassis, right? But what you'll notice here is that in this type of design, right, you generally have this secondary chamber where you would have kind of a wider cavity space to be able to install other items. Now this chassis is pretty interesting because you can actually rear mount the radiator. So it's not just actually a space to put like cables or the power supply, but you could actually rear mount the radiator, which would make installation quite interesting if you wanted to have kind of a more stealth look, because you could actually, instead of having the radiator up here at the top, you could run the actual radiator through the back and then actually have the tubing just kind of have this side kind of design, which makes for definitely a different looking aesthetic. That would be kind of the benefit of a more dual chamber chassis. I would say the other negative though, potentially, of a dual chamber chassis like this, as opposed to maybe more compact, is also you're going to use even more fan configurations that you would have to kind of account for. But overall, they can really both provide, I think, a pretty cool design aesthetic. But let's see what other questions we might have in here. So can you tell me what case that is? So which one? The one right here, this one's the GT502 Horizon, and this one is the A31. So A31, we have this one in both white and black. This one supports BTF and standard motherboard designs, as well as the GT502, which you see right here, comes in white and black, but that one does not support BTF-based motherboards. Let me go ahead and actually bring up, and I'll drop that one in the chat there if you guys want to see. So give me a second. I will drop this one in the chat for you. All right, so I will drop it in here, but here's the A31. Like I said, the big difference here is this is going to be much more compact in terms of the actual width compared to traditional dual chamber chassis. Again, BTF support, 20 gigabits USB, which is quite nice. I also really like the fact that here you have a lot of extra reservoir space. So in a lot of chassis, generally you have a more limited top spacing, so usually maybe about 30 to 40 millimeters. This one you could readily support actually up to quite a bit more. So whether you want to have a thicker radiator, so you want to go from like 27 to 30 to even larger, or maybe you want to have a push and pull fan configurations or different things like that, just having essentially more clearance space is going to be more favorable. Now this is already offset, so that even though if you have a really tall heatsink like what we do here on this Apex motherboard, it won't impact against the actual VRM assembly, which is something that where you have more offset design can be advantageous. So that is something that's kind of cool here. But this one's already available. Our pricing is pretty inexpensive on this one. I think right now the non-plus model is going to be, I think we had it on promo for $79.99. Normal price is a little bit more. Normal price is, let me see here if I can give you guys the link right here. Yep, you can already find it listed at Amazon, Newegg, a number of different kind of e-tailers, but I will drop the A31 chassis there in the link for you guys. Give me one sec here. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and see what other questions you might have. So, Maz, my question is, the Thor 3, is it still on track for Q3? As of right now, I would say that we are tentatively on track for Q3 in terms of the release. I would note, though, that if you're interested in actually checking out the Thor, you might actually want to check out the ROG Strix Platinum. So the Strix Platinum will actually be, it's already right now available. So the Strix Platinum is going to be essentially using the same overall topology design. It has the same high-end heat sinks. It has the GaN MOSFET technology as well as the exclusive GPU voltage stabilizer design. So the Strix Platinum series will actually be available ahead of the Thor 3 models. So really the main differential is that, of course, with the Thor 3s, you're going to have the OLED display. So if we actually bring up the Thor 3s here, we can bring up Thor 3. Let's see here. Yeah. The Thor 3 model, you'll have this really cool, of course, display. And there's actually a dual display for this generation where you have the display on both sides. So it's a magnetic pogo pin design where you can remove that. You can put it either on either side if you wanted that. But keep in mind, This chassis, take for instance, would be a good example. There'd be no point almost to put a Thor in here because you can't actually see the display, right? But if you have maybe something like our Hyperion or maybe another company's chassis where you have a visible bottom bay and you want to be able to see that, then that provides a cool benefit. You also, of course, have the ARGB lighting. To keep in mind, you need to have the corresponding cable running from the power supply to a motherboard header to be able to have the synchronized lighting experience. But the other big benefit is going to be this guy right here, where if we move down and we take a look at the rear of the unit, let's see here if we can go to this GPU voltage stabilizer design. You notice these like those little purple pins. There's actually dedicated sensing pins, and those sensing pins will actually allow for essentially a higher level of responsiveness in terms of the transient load when the GPU puts that onto the graphics card, and that actually can help to uplift performance a little bit for the actual graphics card. So this is an exclusive design that's both on the Strix Platinum model as well as on the ROG Thor model. It doesn't matter regardless of wattage, they both have that. But yes, right now we're hoping probably for, I'd say, mid to late Q3 is probably what's going to be on pace for the Thor models. But the Strix Platinum models, I believe already one of the models is already listed online and available, but the totality of them for the Strix Platinums will be out before the Thor 3 models. Okay. Let's go ahead and see what other questions. So Ghost Rider Man, thanks for joining us. Do you have any more information on when the BTF Hero will be hitting shelves? So I'm assuming you're probably referring to the newly announced ROG Crosshair X870 BTF-based motherboard. Right now, we haven't finalized a release date for it. So the first model that actually will be coming to market will be the Tough Gaming B850 BTF, and that one we should have pretty shortly. I think that one you'll actually probably see listed within the next probably week and a half or so. To 2 weeks in terms of actually availability. So for those of you who might not be aware, and I'd love to see in terms of the chat, let me know how many people are actually aware of what BTF is. Do you have actually a BTF based system? We're now in the second generation version. The first generation was offered exclusively on Intel. Now for the second generation, we have both Intel and AMD based product offerings. And so this gentleman, Ghost Rider, is asking us about the actual second AMD based model that we just announced at Computex. So we have a B850 option, which is going to be a white. And then if you want to even go for a higher end base model that will be in black, we'll have the Crosshair X870 Hero BTF base model. And for that model, I would right now estimate that we're probably going to be looking at sometime within Q3. But if you're a part of our PCDIY group, which you can actually check out the link in the YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can check out the link in the description. Or you can make sure to just do an internet search and look for ASUS PCDIY Heartbeat Community. You can join us there. We actually post the real-time updates in terms of brand new product announcements, availability announcements, and a whole bunch of other things in there. And you'll know first essentially right away when we're ready to actually launch the Crosshair board. But as hopefully we look to kind of kick off and restart our weekly PCDIY streams, we'll let you know on the streams when the actual board is going to be available. But again, probably look to Q3, and for the B850 model, you should probably be seeing it, like I said, within about the next week to 2 weeks. All right, next question here. Can you run 3 Gen 5 PCIe NVMe drives and graphics cards at X8 on the X890 Hero? So this is an interesting question. I think some people get over focused on thinking about kind of PCI link speeds. So I think the first thing that you kind of want to evaluate is why are you kind of focused on needing essentially Gen 5 based interconnect? So on most motherboards, take for instance actually this model, this is an Apex, take for instance, this board is kind of interesting because it has dual by 8 slots that onto it. Some people would already be like, well, already by running it by 8, you're actually going to have a performance reduction. And in reality, that's not the case, because in the vast majority of situations, you're never actually going to be saturated in terms of needing all that bandwidth for that specific device on the GPU side. So if you're running a GPU, let's say by 16 versus by 8, effectively it's going to be the same performance, whether you're talking about a 9070 XT, or whether you're talking about a 7900 XTX, whether you're talking about a 4090 or even a 5080 or a 5090, they're all going to be well within pretty much maximizing their performance on by 8. Now with PCIe NVMe M.2 SSDs, this is interesting because if you want to kind of fully test the full saturated throughput, so you're going to run like a benchmark like Atto or Crystal Disk or Iometer or something along those lines, you can definitely maximize quote unquote the full bandwidth, right? But the reality is normal workloads don't generally use that type of saturation across the PCIe bus. So if you actually are talking about from a general kind of day in and day out usage, gaming, application loading, things along those lines, you're going to find that really you're probably not exceeding, I would even say probably about a gigabyte worth of actually sustained actually bandwidth saturation. So In most situations, really what that means is that unless you're kind of like a professional creator that's actually actively transferring from disk to disk and you're actually using sustained reads and writes where you really want most of that bandwidth, this probably isn't a realistic question that you really have to kind of be evaluating for yourself. But if you are in a scenario where you find that, hey, I really want to try to maximize the number of drives, the three things you want to look at is one, you have to look at the model that you're looking at, and then you would want to look at the PCIe lane information. So let's go ahead and actually go to the model in question. So you're asking about the Hero, and in the Hero, you'll actually be able to take a look at the PCI layout specs. So a way you could do this is if you head over into the tech specs, you can also pull up the manual. The manual will help to kind of break this down for you. But if you scroll down, you'll be able to see the actual number of corresponding slots that you have available. And so critically, what you want to look at is not only the number of slots that are available from the CPU, but also the number of lanes that are provided from the chipset. Because the chipset could provide additional lanes, and then also the CPU can provide additional lanes. Now we can see right here from the x870 side, right, you're going to have Gen 4, Gen 4, and only Gen 5 are going to be available within these, right? But you're also going to notice that there's going to be these asterisk markers, and the asterisk markers would indicate to you whether or not there's going to actually be a change within the actual link speed based on other actually slots being populated. And so that'll also help you to answer kind of knowing whether or not you have access to that number of slots being utilized in relation to if you're going to be using something else. Take, for instance, like I'm going to use this GPU with this number of slots, and is it going to affect this corresponding speed? Another feature that you might actually find useful and interesting to help you to kind of get a sense in terms of how things are operating, especially if you've got a newer motherboard, is actually going to be a feature called Q Dashboard. So Q Dashboard, I might actually be able to go ahead and demo this for you guys. So let me go ahead and do this. Let me know if everybody is actually seeing this okay. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to switch over here. Let's see if this will work. Okay. All right. Hopefully you guys are seeing me there on the screen. I'm kind of within a window, but we're going to reboot here, and we're going to go into the UEFI on our system. This system is actually a newer Intel-based system. So on our newest based motherboards, they actually do have this feature. So we're going to go ahead and do this. So give me 1 second here. There we go. And we'll show you. So I'm just going to essentially go into the UEFI BIOS. And once you go into the UEFI BIOS on the newer generation of boards, so this would be for Z890, this would be for B860, B850, and X870, they have this feature called Q Dashboard, which will actually allow you to visualize the motherboard's layout in terms of the actual slots and ports that are being used. So what I can do is I can head over here to the tool section. Once I head over to the tool section, I can head over right here to, you can see this BIOS dashboard. Okay, and once I click into that, you can actually see that you have a visual map that actually shows you the board in terms of all the slots that are actually utilized or populated. So you can actually see here, these are the ports that are being used, right? Because they're highlighted in green, they're highlighted in green. I can see whether or not I have an actual M.2 drive. And then from there, I can even actually click on this to get the corresponding link speeds. The cool thing is you can do filters. So you can see right here, if I just wanted to take a look at kind of the M.2, I can see actually how many slots, whether or not the slots are actually occupied. And then if I want to go in and find out things like the link speed information, I can, click in there, and then the click in will actually help me to note what's the actual corresponding link speed. So you can see that the link speed right there is actually PCI Express Gen 4 that's gone ahead and been matrixed for that. So that can also help to give you some additional context to understanding what's going on if you are utilizing one of the newer systems. So that's a pretty cool feature. That is right now only on the latest generation motherboards, but again, if you're going to be utilizing X870, which you asked about, you would actually have that feature. Again, that feature is called Q Dashboard, and it's actually one that I was really happy to be able to get implemented. I worked really closely with our team to see that feature get implemented. So pretty cool. So Ghostwriter goes, what chassis would you recommend for a dual GPU build? Well, that's pretty interesting because most normal motherboards don't support dual GPU configurations anymore because SLI and Crossfire don't exist. You do still have kind of the NVLink protocol. So I would assume that if you're going to run a dual GPU configuration, it's probably because you're maybe more in the professional or the prosumer space. So maybe you're doing something like 3D rendering, or you're doing science and simulation, maybe doing LLM modeling, AI inferencing, things along those lines. So the first thing is you would want to make sure to be looking at a motherboard. So an example of a motherboard that might support that might be something like our Creator series, our ProArt motherboards, or the Apex right here next to me, as well as some of our higher-end ROG models like the Maximus Heroes do actually support dual slot-based designs, and those are optimally suited for like our Prime or our Pro graphics cards, which are only 2.5 slot in design. And this is important because if we take a look at a motherboard right here, like this is the X870 Creator, you'll see that it actually has 2 slots onto it. So it's actually been designed to allow you to run dual GPUs. If we look at most normal motherboards, they will not have that secondary by 8 interconnect slot to allow you to run 2 GPUs. So that's the first most important part, is you need to make sure your motherboard actually supports that configuration. The second part would be that you would want to look at actually a graphics card. Like here, if we take a look at our Prime, 5080, take for instance. I'll just go ahead and look up this model. The Prime 5080, all of our Prime cards and actually all of our ProArt cards only are 2.5 slots. So that's very important, is that here, if we actually go look at the tech specs, you can actually verify this, but the 2.5 slot dimensions, so you can see right here, this 2.5 slot would mean this is optimally suited, that you could essentially put 2 of those graphics cards onto the motherboard to run a dual GPU configuration. Now, as far as what I would recommend, I would probably say that you're going to be running a slightly bigger base chassis just to be able to ensure that you get good airflow. So my recommendation would probably be, I really like our GT302. Our GT302, this model, let me go here. Sorry, I put in one extra right here. GT302 is going to give you a lot of flexibility in terms of having a great deal of airflow that you don't have to think about. This already comes pre-installed with 4 140 millimeter, 28 millimeter thick fans. So that's going to be a great degree of airflow that's going to be able to come in and really help to ensure your GPU's got a lot of cool air, right? Working with those heatsink assemblies to be able to ensure cool operation, especially when you're going to be running dual GPUs because they're closer stacked together. You're going to get more heat pooling. You want to make sure you got a good, healthy amount of intake airflow that's coming into the system. So I think, one, the GT302 is a good option. This is also quite reasonable, $150. This chassis actually supports both ATX standard builds and BTF based builds. You have those 4 fans that all come pre-installed, which I think are fantastic. If you want to go something that's maybe a little bit more streamlined, maybe less RGB, you could also consider the PA602. That's going to be our ProArt based chassis, and that one comes with ultra large fans that are going to be pre-installed. So that's this model right here. This is a little bit higher end base model that you could consider. So there's 2 200 millimeter fans that are pre-installed, and then a rear thick 140 millimeter fan. But yeah, this is going to have 2 200 millimeter intake fans that are already pre-installed. Gives you a huge amount of intake airflow and would, I think, work well for a dual GPU based configuration. This one also would include a GPU anti-sag bracket that's already all installed on the inside of the chassis. There's also a really cool feature that I really like on this chassis. Right here, there's actually an integrated dust filter sensor. So as actually dust gets accumulated into the front of the chassis, this little LED light would turn on to let you know that you should actually remove the dust filter, clean it, and then put it back in. So that's would be my recommendation for 2 different chassis. But again, even if you don't choose an ASUS chassis, make sure that you've got a chassis that can readily support, again, the layout dimensions for the motherboard, and that you also have a good amount of sufficient intake airflow to be able to provide to those GPUs. Okay. The ASUS A31 ATX, I'm looking at it right now. I like that mouse as well. Yeah, this one actually is a little bit of a sleeper. It's still actually one of the favorite mice that we produce. This is the Strix Impact. I really love the Strix Impact 3. Do I actually, you know what? This is pretty cool. And again, we're just using this really loosely, guys, because today's stream, we're not focusing on one specific thing. But one really cool item that I really love about the Strix Impact models is those models actually support our push-fit hot swap design. So the way that actually works right here, I don't have my secondary camera. I took it down for a minute, so I can't show you guys. So hopefully we'll be able to do this in frame. But one of the cool things that you have with that design is you can easily remove off the shell. So once there's pretty much just 4 screws. So you just remove the actual the rubber grommets, right, which will essentially are underneath. Once you remove those, there's just the screws. You unscrew that, and then you can pull off this latch. And so the really cool thing about this is that the most common point of failure in most mice is actually going to be the switches. So when you're actually clicking on a mouse, these are your switches, right? The switches are the most common point of failure. Now, we already use very good quality micro switches where the actual the internal plunger in the switch itself is actually gold plated. That's important because that reduces oxidation, which is actually usually where you have the failure over time. So sometimes cheaper manufacturers, they won't actually use higher grade switches, and so they'll have a higher likelihood to oxidize, and then that will create double clicking or failure. So for most mice, you're stuck. If you don't know how to solder once that switch fails, you pretty much are stuck. The mouse is just, it's no longer usable. With our design, it's pretty cool because you can literally take this off, and you can see right here, I can literally remove the mouse switch right here. So right here, this is one mouse switch. This one is I think these are TTCs. Yeah, these are TTCs. We have our RG micro switch, which comes in our mice. These are actually right here. These are different set. These are actually optical switches. But depending on the push fit socket design, you can then take that other switch, and I can just put that switch in there. And now I've mounted in a different mouse switch in there. I have like over 20 different types of mice switches. So I've got some that are lighter, some that are heavier, some that are louder, some that are softer. You can even mod this with actually a pretty cool Kale, what's called silent switch. So I have actually a mouse that I use that I have the silent switch, where I actually had to file it just a little bit. I filed it a little bit to be able to make it fit. But once it fits in there, it's kind of wild because the mouse doesn't make any sounds at all. It's just literally I can click, but it's silent. But I really like that for when I'm working really late at night. I don't want to even hear anything. So I use that with my ASUS keyboard, where I have silent switches in there along with the silent switches in my mouth. And so everything's really, really, really quiet. But that's a really cool feature. And so, yeah, if you like that design, check out the ROG Strix Impact 3 Wireless. That is a model that also has that push-fit socket design, but we have quite a number of other models that also have the push-fit socket design. Some of our ACE models don't have that, so just keep in mind that not every single model has the push-fit socket design, but if that's something you want to be able to do, that is a pretty cool design that is something ASUS pioneered as far as the push-fit socket design. And again, it's really simple. So once I would push in that socket, push in that new switch, all I would need to do is just pretty much put on the cover, and then from there, bam, I'm good to go, and I can use my mouse. So it's a pretty cool feature, and again, really eliminates a lot of concern if you're not somebody that knows how to do soldering, or if you don't want to go about having to purchase soldering just to fix the mouse. You can now just go ahead and swap out those mouse switches. I like the traditional style of chassis better. Newer styles don't hurt, though. They are aesthetically pleasing. I think, yeah, it's all comes down to preference, right? You know, sometimes the disadvantage of a kind of a more panoramic system, this one actually does a really good job because the entire rear panel is actually all mesh. Then you have the lifted design, and then there's also opportunity to actually have like reverse fans in, so you can actually bring in additional airflow. So ideally what you don't want is the aesthetics to compromise the ability to be able to have essentially like a good thermal experience. But I would agree, if we compare this to like something like the GT302, which would be a more traditional design, one thing that I do like about more traditional chassis designs is they tend to have a little bit more of an ID design to them. And what I mean by that is that they have like a more deliberate design that's present, because since it's not just glass, you have to kind of make more conscious decisions on the look and feel of how the chassis presents itself. And I think that that's kind of cool because it gives the chassis kind of a more of an identity, if that makes sense. And that's, I think, one of the benefits is that when you have less just panels, right, you're not necessarily focusing on just the hardware, but you're also focusing on the overall design and the look and feel of the chassis. A great example of that would be something like if we look at like our Hyperion. That's a very high-end chassis that is going to be kind of one of our flagship models here. Let me see if I go into the Hyperion. Yeah, so this is our Hyperion. You can readily really kind of get a sense of the vibe of it has a certain aesthetic, right? So you can see right here that because it's not just glass in the front, we have this really cool X-frame design, right? And that X-frame design inherently kind of gives it like this more kind of sci-fi, modern, kind of mecha type of vibe to it, which I think looks really cool, really distinct. So that's, I agree with you. I kind of like when chassis don't necessarily always follow that, but we have a lot of different chassis to be able to complement with the different look and feels that people want, right? Some people want something that's big, bold, and bright. Some people want to go with something that's really compact, right? So like a micro ATX chassis. Some people want to be able to go, you know, with something that might has a more stylized aesthetic, or you go kind of with the ProArt models, which are really kind of refined and minimal. So that's the cool thing about PCDIY, is about choice, right? You can kind of go with whatever you're looking for, right? All right. Let me go ahead and see here. Jotabi, hopefully I'm saying that right. Is there a Strix case coming out? Regular size ROG cases are either too big or too small. Yeah, we actually, I talked about this in the Computex live stream, but since this is just a general community Q&A, let me go ahead and see if I bring it up here, if I still have the pictures of it. I think I do. Yes, I think I have it right here. If not, I'll go ahead and bring it up in the chat. Do I still have the images? Okay, let me Let me bring it up right here. Give me 1 second. But yes, we are actually going to be releasing an updated version of the Helios. So the Helios was actually the very first ROG chassis that ever got released. And a lot of people really loved it. It had a kind of very bold kind of front design with it, right, where it had actually an etched glass panel that was really cool looking. But the new version, I'd say, is more kind of refined. It's more minimal in terms of the design aesthetic. I think it hits a nice balance that it's smaller than something like the Hyperion, right? But it's probably going to be around the size of like the GT302. So again, you can fit pretty much any hardware that you're going to want within this chassis. So it just comes down to, you know, whether or not you like this stylized aesthetic. And this one probably should be available, I think, by the very beginning of Q3. We were hoping to launch it in Q2, but we didn't end up getting everything finalized just due to a number of different factors. But let me go ahead and bring it up for you right here. So this is a little bit of a teaser. Again, you can actually find the post that we did up this in our PCDIY Heartbeat community, because the product page is not up for it. But this is one of the cool things about being part of our community, is you can find out about the new products as we're getting ready to kind of tease them or put them out there. So you'll see that it keeps kind of this cool little angular design language that we had from the original Helios. But you can see in the front, you don't have that front glass anymore. So now it's really focused at kind of high degree of airflow from the intake side. You still get those straps, which are very much kind of a hallmark appearance there for the Helios series. You get kind of this cool rear open design, right, which is more visible, but you also have a door, so help to kind of manage that if you're not going to really clean all those cables, it still will look nice and refined, right, from that perspective. If we go in on the inside, you can still see you also have that open PSU cabinet, right? So that if you want to be able to go ahead and have, let's say, visibility to a nice stylized PSU, whether it's an ROG Strix or a Thor series model, then these will still work really well for that. And you can see here in terms of the hardware, it fits in a lot of kind of core hardware where there's no problem. So that's an Astral 5090, right? There's the Thor. That's our upcoming Ryu 4 BTF optimized cooler. Actually, this is not the BTF optimized version. The BTF optimized version would actually be the shorter cables, which would run up here to the back, right? But you can see this will fit pretty much all the key hardware you want, but not necessarily feel like too big, right? You can kind of comfortably fit all of the key hardware that you want, but it'll still kind of feel a bit more compact than you would have with something like the Hyperion. So this will be the GX601. Right now, we don't have a name for this model. I don't know if we'll call it the Helios 2 or if it'll have an entirely new name, but make sure to keep it tuned. And we'll also have another ROG chassis coming probably in Q3 with the GR801, which right now doesn't have a name, but it will be a panoramic ROG chassis. Okay, so that one will also be coming. So Ghost Rider goes, as I'm waiting for the heroes, I was going to do a standard hero, but then I heard about the BTF version, decided to wait as I'm building a new rig. Yeah, I mean, as long as you've got a chassis that can support BTF, the boards are going to be pretty much functionally identical in terms of the feature, function, and spec. It's just that, you know, BTF, the cool thing about the BTF motherboards too, that sometimes people don't realize, is that a BTF motherboard will allow you to support a standard graphics card or also let you support a BTF-based graphics card. So even if you don't get a BTF graphics card, as long as your chassis supports it, you can still do pretty much any standard build with any graphics card you want. So you still have a great deal of flexibility. And with our BTF Alliance, since we've now already been able to pretty much get every single chassis partner to be able to produce at least one, if not multiple BTF chassis, you have great deal of choice in the industry. Although, of course, we do have some great options in terms of BTF-based ecosystem. So yeah, I think it's great that you're considering BTF. I'd love to see you post your build once you actually have it ready in the PCDIY Heart Review community. We're going to be bringing back the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, which is when we actually showcase your guys' weekly, your weekly submissions here on the PCDIY stream. So if that's something you want to share with us, please be part of the group and actually take advantage of the PCDIY Builder Spotlight submission. Okay. Joe Smith, is there a release date for the ProArt RTX 5080 GPU? Not yet. We haven't 100% finalized it. Right now, the first new updated GPUs that we're going to have is going to be the white models. So we're going to have the Prime 5070 models. We'll have the Tough Gaming 5070 Ti, then the ROG Astral, which will also be available in white. Once the white models are complete, we'll then transition to go into the ProArt-based availability. I would say right now, I'd say rough expectation should probably be sometime in probably early-ish Q3 timeframe. Maybe possibly mid Q3. It just depends, as we're right now also finalizing the design for the M.2 SSD version, right, for the ProArt graphics card. So do keep that in mind, is that we will have different versions of the ProArt based SSD. I don't know if you guys caught of course, the live stream that we were doing in relation to the ProArt based graphics cards, But let me see if I can go ahead and show you guys this here. And I'd love to see your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think about this type of design? Let me see if I have, yeah. Here we go. I think we got some of the ProArt based graphics card over here. Yeah, so credit to our friend Mr. Justin Chu, who helped to kind of share some of these images over here. But this is the card that he's asking us about on. So the ProArt based graphics card. These, of course, you can totally use this for a gaming build, but we recommend ProArt models for generally our content creators, our prosumers out there, so people doing videography, photography, animation, modeling work, science and simulation, things along those lines, right? But of course, is entirely the same GPUs you would have in any one of our gaming related products. But they don't have any RGB lighting. These will also have higher performing PCBs, VRMs, and thermal solutions than we have in the Prime based models. So the Prime models are still great options. They're also triple fan design and 2.5 slot. So these are also triple fan design, 2.5 slot, but the PCBs and the PCB and VRM and the heatsink assemblies are upgraded compared to the Prime models. You'll also see that for this generation, the prior gen was really minimal, where it's just the black with the gold accents, no RGB lighting. This new variant, we have a little bit of this kind of wood grain design, which I think is pretty clean, pretty cool in terms of the design. And then let me see here. You'll notice that here's a difference. This model, you notice, looks entirely flat on the back with nothing special about it. But I think we might have another image where you have this one. So this is going to be the SSD version. So you'll see right here on the back, there's actually an M.2, a PCIe NVMe M.2 SSD slot, so that you can run a high speed up to a PCI Express Gen 5 M.2 based SSD. So this is something called PCI bifurcation. So pretty much any of our new motherboards all support PCI bifurcation, especially over the last few years. So this means you put this into the graphics card slot, and the graphics card would essentially take the lanes that would normally be the full 16, half that, right? So 8 would be provided to the GPU, and then the other percentage of the lanes would be provided to the actual M.2 SSD slot. This is really cool, especially if you're running maybe older systems where you have maybe less M.2 SSD slots on the motherboard, or maybe you have also maybe more mid-range motherboard where it didn't have a Gen 5 slot for M.2, but it had a Gen 5 slot for graphics. So this could also give you a pathway to that. And for people that are wondering, does this affect performance? It doesn't. Actually, in our testing, performance is pretty much identical. As I said, right now, 4080 at 4090, 5080, 5090, they're not constrained by running it by 8 versus running it by 16. And for the actual M.2 drive, it actually gets even better performance because, one, you're getting CPU linked lanes versus being a lane that's linked to the chipset. So that means less latency. But also from a thermal performance perspective, for very high speed Gen 4, Gen 5 drives, we generally have noticed quite a bit better temperature performance because you're getting essentially kind of that additional airflow that's coming from the heatsink assembly and for the fans, where you don't generally have that on a motherboard. So even when our motherboards have very big and dense M.2 heatsinks, we're generally finding that usually somewhere between about 7 to 12 degree reduction is present on this slot than you would have compared to a motherboard. I'm on Intel 13th gen sufferer. When you say sufferer, I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, 13th gen is still very performant. I mean, I still have one of my other systems that has a 13900K on there. That's still a really fast system in terms of that. And the spec on a Z790F is really nice. You got tons of M.2 slots. You got tons of USB high-speed ports on there. It's a really well-spec'd board. You've got even still some nice overclocking headroom that's available on a 13900K, especially if you're not somebody that kind of focuses on the over-communicated perspective of power requirements. The reality is, why they do consume a little bit more power, most of the power kind of discussion that gets put out there from that the temperature is more difficult to manage isn't realistic, because people are doing things like they're running like an extended run of like Blender for 20 minutes. Most gamers are never going to see that type of workload. If you were to run Cyberpunk, or if you run Forza, if you were to run, The Witcher with all of the kind of settings all cracked out, you're never going to see these type of kind of thermal requirements in the same way you're going to see a multi-threaded workload. So you can definitely actually even extend the performance even further by kind of overclocking, which that board has AIOC, which we did a really great live stream that talked about how you can actually use the AIOC to be able to do some really easy kind of performance tuning to your system. The one question I would note is that, of course, if you have potentially one of the CPUs that did have the degradation issue, Intel did release, of course, firmware that we have issued for all of those motherboards so that you can go ahead and institute that. Now, the question is, if you already had the issue occur to you, then you would want to reach out to Intel for warranty support for your CPU to be ultimately be replaced. It doesn't affect or damage the motherboard, so on that side, you should just need to be able to replace the CPU, and then you can get back up and running. Just make sure you're running the up-to-date firmware, and you would be good to go. But otherwise, outside of that, I mean, I wouldn't be going out of my way to essentially just update if I already had a 13th gen system. A 13th gen system is still extremely performant, can give you a great experience. I wouldn't say that you have any reason to kind of immediately change out that platform, because again, overall from a feature, function, and spec standpoint, it's a really still great platform, and it's also quite mature. Notwithstanding, like I said, that last update, which was released to help to resolve the CPU instability issues, but those have now been resolved and you're good to go. So you can definitely still feel confident that you can have a performance, stable, and reliable system, right? Joe Tiz, I guess the question if there's any regular size ROG case. That is, I would say regular size, because the Helios is not on extra large chassis, right? I mean, that's smaller than even something like the GT502, which the GT502 is very similar to something like the O11, which is one of the most popular chassis that is in the market. So from a regular perspective, I would say that that's already kind of regular. Now, if you're talking about more compact, so this is like the A31 is actually pretty compact, because this would be a little bit kind of almost even smaller than something like the GT302. We don't have any immediate plans for something that would be smaller than the updated Helios. So the Helios is about as small as we would go, which I think also kind of makes sense, because technically, if you kind of think about it from an ROG perspective, most of the ROG products that we have, whether they're ROG Strix or formal ROG, so like Crosshair or Maximus, those are higher end products, which tend to also be a little bit larger. So again, if you've got a bigger cooler, bigger graphics card, bigger motherboards, you also want to be able to make sure that all of those can comfortably fit within there. So yeah, right now the only new upcoming ROG chassis, like I said, are going to be the GX601 and then the GR801, and those are going to both be designed for the ATX segmentation of the market. Okay. Wow, that is an advanced BIOS. Yes, that is a pretty cool feature as far as that function that we've introduced. Ghostwriter says AI inferencing. Yeah. So the other really cool thing that you might really like, Ghostwriter, is that hopefully in relation to those graphics cards that we're going to be releasing, we're also going to be putting out a pretty cool piece of software that we call LM Tuner. LM Tuner will have an advanced actually dashboard system that will be designed to allow you to take quite a number of different actually LLM models. You can preset, kind of go into those models, and you can essentially kind of compile your system and set up very quickly, right, with a lot less work than you normally would need to be able to. So we're very excited about offering this software. It kind of follows up the prior software that we offered. Right now, I'd love to know in the chat how many of you might have an ASUS 50 series card right now, and if you do, have you used actually a piece of software that we call MuseTree? So MuseTree is actually a piece of software that we release for free, and this is actually a generative AI based application. The big difference is, for a lot of people that have maybe heard about generative AI, you would have to go in and use kind of like a web-based platform, and actually sometimes it can be quite expensive to pay for the tokens or the subscription licensing to start doing a lot of this generative AI on the cloud, right? Like I was recently talking to a creator that said just for a couple of hours for doing some demos that he was trying to kind of work out, he spent close to almost $200 in terms of actually creating that content. So the cool thing that we do with MuseTree is that, one, this is actually running locally on your system. So the benefit of that one is not only that, one, you're not having to pay for anything because it's utilizing your hardware. The other second benefit is also the anonymity. So regardless of what you're running and creating, you don't have to have other people be aware of what you're generating. You can go through your personal development, store your information, and you get that superior level of anonymity and that reduced cost. So this is exclusively provided to people that buy ASUS 50 series cards. It doesn't matter which actually model. So you could get a Prime card, you could get a ProArt, you could get an ROG, a Tough Gaming. They all will have access to the MuseTree software. It has a really cool front end that's quite simple to use, that actually uses these nice little pop-up boxes where you can go in, you can put your prompt, and then once you get your kind of initial rendered output, you can then go in and kind of just keep branching off of those things with additional prompts to be able to kind of continue to curate your kind of generative AI journey. So if you've actually never tried out generative AI and it's kind of something you want to see, how does it really work, but also not have to pay for it and be able to kind of see how it might be able to provide you a benefit. This was our first kind of option that we wanted to be able to offer to users, right? Within a value set of you considering ASUS hardware. So you get this right now when you get, like I said, ASUS 50 series. The next piece of software that we're going to be doing is, like I said, on the LLM side. So we'll have one essentially, if you want to think about kind of for the generative development process that's more visually based, and then we'll have another one that's more kind of, like I said, text based, right, with the LLMs. So those are going to be the two pieces of software that we'll be offering. Pretty cool. Okay. Let me go ahead and drop that in the chat too. So if you guys want to try that out, you can go ahead and feel free to check that out. Let me go ahead and see here. Litecoin is, what is Gundam exactly, an RG brand? No, so Gundam is actually, if you're a big fan of kind of anime, so ASUS actually does what we call these ASUS collaborations. We call them IP collaborations because our goal there is we internally developed something a few years back that we called the ACG initiative. So the ACG initiative was anime, comics, and games. And so our goal with our team was to be able to kind of work with leading IPs out there in the world of anime, comics, and games to be able to kind of bring this synergy between our ASUS hardware and then those IPs. So when we did ASUS Gundam, Gundam is, of course, one of the most well-respected and revered kind of anime that has been out there, right? I'm a big Gundam fan, and so we actually worked with them to be able to actually integrate the Gundam IP into different types of ASUS hardware. So you can see here, here's where two examples if we had of the actual Gundam IP being integrated. These were with kind of like Tough Gaming ecosystem, and then we had ones within the RG ecosystem. And we've done quite a number of these different collaborations. We also did one with Evangelion, right, which is of course very popular. We actually did two different waves of Evangelion. I liked maybe wave one even more than our second wave, but they were both beautiful. This was an example here of the Evangelion. And we recently just launched our newest IP collaboration, right? Let me go ahead and see if I can bring that one up here, guys. So yeah, so this is for Miku. If you guys didn't see this one, we recently announced this. So this is our upcoming Miku collaboration that we're going to have, where we just started announcing it. So you've got, of course, your mouse, your keyboard, gaming surface, and there's also a headset that's in here. So this one's kind of perfect focus. I'm not going to give you guys all the details. There'll be more to come though, so make sure to keep it tuned. So we do have to keep our IP collaborations very, very confidential just because of the nature of the complexity that we have in terms of kind of the IP discussions that we're working on. But this is always a really exciting initiative that we're always kind of working on in the background, is going like, what's the next IP that we might collaborate with, right? Like I said, again, from the anime, comics, and games, right? Let me go ahead and say, so yeah, Litecoin says insanely cool. Yeah, I think it's actually pretty cool overall. Yeah. So overall, let me go ahead and see if we got any other questions right there. So Zootopia says, any Hall effect keyboards? Yeah. So we actually already not recently, but we did already launch our first Hall effect based keyboard. So let me go ahead and bring that one up right here. Give me 1 second. Should have it right here. So this is actually our Falchion Ace HFX, and we actually have another model that we just announced, but this is our current Hall effect based keyboard. So this one actually is a wired based model, supports 8,000 polling rate. It has our custom in-house HFX based switches. This model is really cool though for a couple of different reasons. You have hardware based profiling options on the unit. You also have this kind of cool top cover that actually protects the unit, so dust, debris, dander doesn't worry about kind of getting on the ingress of the unit right here. There's also some other cool design elements that we actually do on this model. So let me actually bring up some of the other images here. Give me 1 second. Let me see, do I have... If I can bring this up here. Scenario images. Yep, okay, perfect here. Okay, yep. So if you take a look here, it's like where the cover is on and the cover is off, right? So you can kind of see that. If we also go over here, there's some pretty cool stuff that we do on this model as well. So you'll see one, it actually has dual Type-C connectors, both on the left and right-hand side. So that's kind of really cool in terms of favorable, in terms of letting you route the cable where you think it makes the most sense for you, right? So do you want to go to the left-hand side or do you want to go to the right-hand side? You could also actually have it connected to two different systems, and then you can actually switch the input. So you could go from like a desktop to like a laptop or a different system like that. Another really cool option that we have done is this rapid trigger toggle. This rapid trigger toggle is really cool because one of the disadvantages of a Hall effect based keyboard is that once you set the custom actuation, so let's say maybe you get something dialed in for Valorant or for Rainbow Six Siege or CSGO or whatever game you're playing, the reality is that's not going to be very good for daily driving. So if you wanted to just type some YouTube comments, post something on Reddit, write an email, or maybe do some searching on the internet, the experience is not going to be good at all because the custom actuation is not really well suited for typing. The cool thing is here is with this rapid trigger toggle, you have an immediate switch where you can just change from essentially the custom actuation to a normal actuation. So that allows you to kind of from like daily driving typing mode to gaming mode, and you just flip that toggle and bam, you can go back and forth in real time. Now, you also have even more flexibility to that because we do have hardware-based profiles. So actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are actually already all key binded to individual hardware-based profiles. So you could also use that function and then shift to go into one profile, one profile, one profile, one profile for different games or for different applications. So you've got that immediate rapid trigger toggle, but then you also have the ability to go to immediate hardware-based profiles that you can also go ahead and store. But it doesn't stop there too. This is also pretty cool because this button also corresponds with this touchpad, and you can use this for kind of custom macro options. So if you wanted actually volume adjustment, or if you even want to adjust the actuation on a physical keyboard level without even going into software, you could actually press this and that could actually make an adjustment real time. And that's pretty cool because instead of having to kind of go in and out of the software in real time, you can go by feel. You can essentially start making the tuning adjustments while you're playing your game and kind of go like, maybe I want to make this a little bit tighter or a little bit looser, right, based on that actuation. So you can just make those adjustments in real time. So a lot of really cool elements that we do here. This also has a gasket mount design for really nice feel, really nice optimized actuation experience. So this is the Falchion Ace HFX. This is a wired-based model. This one's available right now. But another model that we're actually going to be launching soon is going to be this guy. Let me bring this one up, which will be the Falcata. So the Falcata we showed off at Computex, and we talked about it in last week's stream, so I don't want to kind of go into it too much, but let me go ahead and bring it up over here. So I will show you this, guys. Give me 1 second here, and we'll touch on the Falcata. But the Falcata is going to be our next generation split keyboard Hall effect based model. So if you want something that's actually like super specialized, this is going to be pretty crazy. So this model will be tri-mode. This is going to essentially give you USB-C, Bluetooth, or wired. It will support 8K polling. You'll actually have this really cool kind of hardware level customization for the actuation. It has a knob right down here. You have multiple tenting options. You can actually remove the silicone wrist rests. You can take those off entirely. On the underside, there's actually threaded mounts for different feet that actually have different kind of angled adjustments or tenting modes. You could run just the master control node by itself to have a huge amount of space for kind of your game and your keyboard optimization. So, and these will actually even use a newer version of the HFX switch, which has even a more advanced microcontroller and Hall effect based sensor in it. So the HFX based switches were already some of the best in the absolute industry, where we did a lot of work to really tune those in terms of feel and performance. These will even be higher performing than what we did in the HFX based model. So they're both fantastic, but this will be our next upcoming model. And this one should probably be getting ready to launch, I would say sometime in mid to late July. So it's not still ready yet, but it'll be coming in Q3 timeframe. So again, we're going to have the Ace model wired, and then we'll have this other model, which would be tri-mode. So these will be our two Hall effect units. The last thing I'll note though is that you don't need to focus on Hall effect from a gaming perspective. All of our normal gaming keyboards already have outstanding ultra low latency. All of our wireless units already target sub 1 millisecond latency in terms of the ROG Speednova based chipset. They also have outstanding actually end-to-end latency optimization in terms of actually the signal processing that we do. So the actual actuation performance in terms of you pressing the Hall effect versus a traditional switch, that's not really an advantage. It's not that Hall effect switches are faster. It's more so that you can tune them to your specific gameplay preference. So the question really comes down is, do you actually really want to take advantage of that hyper level of customization? If you're somebody that is not going to go in and actually customize the actuation of the switch, there's no point to you get such a Hall effect keyboard. You're better off just using a normal keyboard. So that is something to kind of keep in mind. And that you can go with any number of our other keyboards that have great switches that we already have that are tuned for great actuation performance, stability, feel, noise profile, all of those elements. So just something to keep in mind in that respect. Okay. All right. Yeah, that cover is pretty awesome. I'm definitely a big fan of that. I would agree, right? Um, you can use a Gen 4 5 drive in a Gen 4 slot, but you would limit the drive to Gen 4 speeds. Correct. Yes. So that is 100% accurate, is that you can always take a PCI Express NVMe Gen 5 drive, and then you could put that into a Gen 4 slot. It just wouldn't go to the peak speeds. But again, keep in mind, this really isn't relevant because even if you took a Gen 5 drive, right? So let's say it can go up to 12, or even the fastest thing now go up to technically almost 14 gigabytes, right? In terms of their peak sequential throughput, when you actually measure your actually sustained throughput for, let's say, game installations, patching of Windows updates, normal application file processing, things along those lines, you're generally averaging usually somewhere between 50 to 250 to maybe like 500 megabytes to maybe sometimes a gig and a half worth of kind of read and write performance. That's going to be well under even PCI Express Gen 3 speeds. The only time that you see saturation based speeds, whether you're talking about PCI Express Gen 4, PCI Express Gen 5, is when you're doing kind of large scale transfers from one drive to another drive. So take for instance, like right here is like, this is our Tough Gaming A2 20 gigabits external drive. It's a pretty fast drive. If you had this connected to your motherboard, and you were going to transfer files from, let's say, that SSD to this drive, you'll really start to saturate the I/O bus between the internal drive and then the external drive. Now, definitely the internal drive is going to be way faster than even this, so it's not going to be a limiting factor there, but that's just an example of when you would see that. Or if you're copying from like SSD to SSD, you're maybe doing like a full Windows image backup, or you're copying files or something like that. That's when you'll see a kind of a benefit. Or professional creators are generally the ones that usually see kind of really using high speed Gen 4 or high speed Gen 5 drives. I'd say more of a benefit than like gamers. The reality is, for most gamers, even if you were probably only using a Gen 3 drive, the performance is already very good. I'm not saying that a Gen 4, Gen 5 drive isn't going to be a great experience for you from a daily driving perspective. You might notice maybe a little bit more snappiness or a little bit more responsiveness, but overall, even still, it's still pretty early right now that most games are not even utilizing direct storage. As we probably see more games that utilize direct storage, you might actually start to see greater and greater benefits from a game performance perspective when you start using a high-speed PCI Express Gen 4 or a ultra-high-speed PCI Express Gen 5 SSD. Right. And in that regard, if you guys want, you guys can actually check out a direct storage benchmark. We actually did this, I think, in our PCDIY group. I don't know if Lee has posted an up-to-date direct storage benchmark, but we had one in our older group where we actually were having people run the benchmark to see, hey, what was the performance difference you had when you ran the direct storage benchmark? But it's a pretty cool little benchmark that allows you to actually see what the throughput performance benefit is from a gameplay scenario. So that's something that you can kind of check out. Okay. Yeah, this is a pretty high-end system. So this is an Apex board. I've got some G-Skill Trident memory here. I think this is 7600 MT, 285, and then not a 50 series. This is a 40 series, but yeah, for the most part, this is still definitely a very, very high-end base configuration. So pretty cool on that side. So let's go ahead. I guess we'll give a little bit more time, see if maybe there's any other questions. If not, we'll probably wrap it up in a little bit here. We've talked about a good amount, but definitely, again, if anybody has any other questions you might have regarding, products, features, function, design, whatever it might be, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat. Love to see what your guys' questions might be on any other topics. If you guys do have, I'll do my best to go ahead and answer them. If not, we'll probably get ready to wrap things up in a little bit right here. This week, we didn't have too many new product announcements. Of course, we had a lot that we covered in terms of last week's stream with, of course, the Computex highlight. So, of course, if you guys have more questions on that side, you can definitely check those items out and let us know if you have more questions on that side. But I would recommend make sure to check out, again, the PCDIY community group that we have. That's a great space to be able to give you insights in terms of the latest product announcements that we have, whether or not they're going to be upcoming products or essentially products that are going to be coming out later that maybe we're teasing, things along those lines. New outlets coming out, are the panels going to be brighter? So that's a really interesting question. So overall, you have seen, I think, some refinement to panel technologies that have allowed for sometimes brighter operation. Good example is, ASUS is the only manufacturer right now that is actually producing panels both from WOLED and from QD-OLED. Pretty much every other manufacturer is going to be one or the other. So there's competitors that take, for instance, have QD-OLED solutions, but they don't offer WOLED solutions. So ASUS is the only company that right now offers both WOLED and QD-OLED. Now, when we talk about brightness, there's two factors to evaluate when we talk about brightness. You have SDR brightness, and then you have HDR brightness. The reality is for SDR brightness, OLEDs are never going to be in the same class that you have with LCDs because you have active backlighting technology there that's able to provide significantly more peak luminance performance. Now, there is some interesting progress that's coming in terms of OLED technology that might finally start to allow for a bigger update to this. But there's a balancing act to consider. And part of the balancing act to consider is that while there's been a lot of improvements to mitigations that can be helped to make sure that OLED panels can allow for a stable and reliable operation and to reduce the likelihood of like burn-in, one of the things you have to account for is temperature. So the hotter that the OLED substrate gets, so the panel itself, if it's kind of operating at or above 60 degrees, that's not healthy. This is part of the reason why originally we started to put kind of specialized cooling designs into the monitor, because we wanted to be able to make sure that we could keep the panels operating at a lower temperature. This helps to maximize their performance in their overall lifespan. So, and also reduce burn-in. So it becomes kind of like a catch-22, because if you want to keep driving the panel more aggressively, you're also potentially trying to drive up the thermals more on the panel, which could work against you in terms of if you really want to be able to ensure long-term stable and reliable operation with not having burn-in. So then you kind of are forced to really try to look at the core panel technology and see are there other areas that you can use to make improvements. There's also a little bit of challenges that if you kind of keep trying to drive peak luminance up, it can also affect things like color accuracy, because sometimes what you're doing is you might be pushing certain colors within the spectrum more so than other colors. So an example is you might be pushing maybe blue a little bit more to make it seem brighter, right? But that can come at the expense of accuracy. And even though some people might not realize this, that's not necessarily what you always want. You always want ideally to try to maintain kind of a color accurate representation. So I think right now, peak brightness is actually pretty good from an HDR perspective on any one of the current, whether you're talking about WOLED or whether you're talking about QD OLED from an HDR gaming perspective. Where I do think that some people would want to see maybe a continued improvement might be more in either peak highlight performance or an SDR. And I'd say in that regard, you might continue to see some improvements, but I think you won't probably see anything disruptive still for a little bit of time. So that, depending on the LCD that you're coming from, you might have to kind of realize that your SDR performance might be a little bit lower than what you might see on an OLED, at least relative to SDR, not to HDR, right? But your last question is, are we going to see some new things? For sure. We did cover some of these within Computex. I think probably the ones that I'm most excited about talking about would probably be our new XG32U series. So the XG32U series here that you're going to see, the big update that we're going to be offering is, again, kind of showing ASUS's innovation and leadership in the industry. We have been the most progressive at really, I think, offering the kind of most dialed in designs to really align with what the community's been asking for. So the cool thing is here is we have our new generation of a true black glossy WOLED offering. So we were the first manufacturer to offer a glossy WOLED previously. Now we're going to have these new true black glossy options, which have actually a new specialized type of design. And you can see really the big benefit is they kind of give you the best of both worlds. You're going to get that semi-gloss look that you would have normally that was only available on QD OLED, but the negative that you had there was that if you had direct kind of lighting, you would tend to have this kind of color fringing or kind of this purple color that would occur if you had kind of direct lighting there, right? WOLED generally had usually better reflection handling and didn't have these kind of ambient color shifting issues that QD OLED had, but then some people didn't like necessarily, didn't feel as punchy or doesn't have as much contrast as what they would say from a kind of semi-glossy perspective. So now you kind of can have the best of both worlds. You can have that really, really impressive black. You can have that punch, you can have that contrast, and those will be available in two models. We'll have a XG32U that will be a 4K 165 FHD toggle to 330 Hertz, and then a 4K 240 with an FHD toggle at 480 Hertz. But keep in mind, those monitors will also have our aspect ratio control. So you can even do crazy stuff like you could run the 32-inch monitor in a 27-inch mode, run that at 1440p, and then like 240 Hertz. Or if you really want to get crazy, you could run like a 24 inches in 4K and like 240 Hertz, which you might think sounds crazy, but the sharpness that you have at actually something at that small, especially for competitive shooters, allows you to have a really, really great kind of pattern recognition and detail recognition in the foreground and in the background. So it can allow for a lot of really interesting options. So don't sleep on the aspect ratio control functionality that's offered in our monitors. It makes a monitor that you might think it would only default be about one size and one resolution actually quite a bit more flexible. So even independent of the FHD toggle, that aspect ratio is pretty cool. So yeah, we have these coming out. There's also still the upcoming 500 hertz QD OLED that we're going to be having come out as well. So those would be the most immediate OLED solutions that we're going to be having coming out. Okay. Headset suggestion. Yeah, definitely. I think for me, you know what? I would grab it, but it's on my desk and I don't want to get up from the stream. But this one actually is an update that we just recently put out. This is the ROG Pelta. I think for the money, this is one of my favorite headsets that's on the market. I mean, of course, I'm biased. I work for ASUS, but I think that we did a fantastic job on it. The really great thing is that the tuning profile that we have, which is on the Delta 2, which is really, really good. It's essentially the same tuning profile here, but you're going to get a lower cost. So this model right here is going to be 155. It went up a little bit from its original pricing because, of course, there's some other market conditions. But some of the cool things here is, one is this is tri-mode, so you're going to be able to have essentially Bluetooth, 2.4 gigahertz, and then hardwire-based connectivity, detachable mic, really comfortable, really nice lightweight suspension-based design, so it's really, really great for long-term comfort. These 50mm titanium-plated drivers are really great. Now, you can still go into the software and you can do more custom tuning if you want, but the default profiling, it allows for good treble detail, nice sharp detail without being kind of too sharp or kind of grating, good mid-range, and good bass definition. Battery life is really, really nice. You can see up to 70 hours, and then the quick charge is 15 minutes with 3 hours worth of use on that side. So I'm a big fan on that end as well. So this would be, I definitely think, a model that I would definitely consider. Again, the 309 grams, this elastic headband, the breathable mesh fabric. I think all of these are really, really nice options that we have here. So this would probably be my initial recommendation as far as kind of checking this out. This also has a 10mm super wideband microphone, which is pretty nice. It's not going to be as good as a discrete microphone, but it's quite solid, I think, in terms of its performance. Now, if you wanted to step up, you could step up to a higher end model with the actual Delta 2. The Delta 2 is going to be very similar, but it is going to offer a couple of differences. So the main thing is you're going to get even better battery life on the Delta 2, more premium construction because it'll have a metal yoke. It has also dual sets of ear cups, so you get kind of a more isolated set of ear cups, and then you have the highly breathable ear cups that also come with that model. And that one also has dual mode based operation. So this one's pretty cool because you get the touch controls on both sides, so you can be able to make adjustments in terms of like your mic and your volume and all that stuff. It's all built in. You're really good to go. But the Delta 2 model will allow you to actually have like your Bluetooth and your 2.4 simultaneously connected. So you could actually take like a call while you're also still connected to the stream. You can do some really cool stuff in that regard. So Delta 2, if you got a little bit more money and you really want the kind of the most premium based option, but I think for a lot of people, I'm a really big fan of that Pelta. That would be my recommendation. Okay. Let me go ahead and see right here. Is John Paul Beacon here says, I have an ASUS X670E ProArt motherboard and a Ryzen 9 79X50 X3D chip. Would you upgrade to the X870E ProArt and the 9950 X3D? I would say no. The 7950 X3D is already very, very performant, and when you talk about kind of like an overall performance perspective, while yes, you would get an uplift, it really also depends, I think, on the resolution and the game engine in terms of what you're looking at in terms of the actual overall benefit. And I would say probably for really most users, there wouldn't be, I'd say, a significant enough uplift unless you're in a specific game scenario that you're finding that you kind of really just need to be able to edge out that additional kind of performance benefit. Even also moving from X870 to X670 to X870, you still have the same CPU support, the power delivery design, the feature, the function, the spec is still all very good on that motherboard. Like on the X670, you still already get things like 10 gigabit, you get a lot of M.2 expansion, you get multi-GPU support. So there's a lot of really great specs. So while there's a couple of things that have been upgraded on the X870 model, I don't see any immediate thing that would make you kind of go like, hey, you would need to step to the X870 model from the X670 base model. And same thing on the CPU side, I think that the performance is very good. And let's actually, if we even take a look at this, let's actually kind of look at it from like an aggregate data. One of, I think, the best sources, if you guys want to look at kind of data in an easy way, would probably be looking at a source like here, like Tech Power Up. So Tech Power Up has a really solid kind of performance baseline. So if we take a look here, I don't know if you're gaming or whether you're doing content creation. These are all factors that you would want to evaluate. But if we look at from kind of gaming perspective, because I'm assuming you got the X3D because you're gaming, right? Because that's really where you would kind of see the focus. You can see here the 9950 X3D, right? And then we can compare that here to the 7950 X3D. So the average performance at 1440p is 173 frames versus, you can see right here on the 7950, where you can see 165. So you're talking, 10 frames, right? Now, of course, in some scenarios, this might be more, but that's across actually a pretty large game sampling engine that they do. So that shows you're really already getting very, very, very good performance. And also keep in mind that with newer AGISA updates, you also have even better DRAM scaling support. So maybe if you wanted to extend to see if you could get a little bit more bandwidth, a little bit more performance, you might be able to do that maybe by also considering maybe some more performance tuning through maybe memory optimization. That could be a favorable way of kind of maybe getting a little bit more kind of headroom. So that could be another alternative. But same thing, you want to be cautious about like, where do you think you would want to put the budget? Is it more towards IO? Is it towards the GPU, towards memory? But I would tell you right now, I think you have a fantastic system based on 7950X3D with that creator motherboard. I don't think you have any reason to make a change to that core hardware. So I think you've got a system that you could be running for years. You don't need to really be swapping out anything in terms of that. I have a PG27 AQDM since launch. I'm asking because I wanted the AQDP, but if they're better, they're coming out. So that's really interesting. The AQDM is actually still one of the brightest OLEDs that has ever been produced. So it's actually quite good from both an SDR and an HDR. I think the main limiting factor is because it's an earlier panel. Sometimes the text rendering performance isn't maybe as good. And especially if you compare that to like a 27-inch 4K offering, so the newer options that we have, the pixel sharpness and the subpixel structure is much better on the newer panel. So if you're wanting to use it like a daily driver as well as actually a gaming panel, that's where the newer panels are going to be, I definitely think, a big difference and a big upgrade. But from a general just kind of OLED experience, that's a really great panel for SDR and for HDR gaming. I would say wanting to have like kind of a clear enough upgrade, the AQDP would be a very solid upgrade, right? Because you would be going to a panel that even had better color gamut performance. It also has, of course, much even higher motion clarity. It has the aspect ratio support. I think the big question will be how that compares against our upcoming 500 hertz. Now, this is going to be the really interesting thing that we're going to be doing as a manufacturer is the 480, even though it's going to be quote unquote less than the 500 hertz, there's still going to be some difference between the WOLED and the QD OLED solution. So I think it'll come down to whether or not you want to look at the AQ DPG, which that'll be our QD OLED 500 hertz, or the AQDP 480 hertz WOLED. So we're going to be offering both of those. I think those will both be good options, and they would both be legitimate upgrades, like especially if you're playing more competitively and you can actually be hitting those refresh rates over 240 hertz. So 300, 320, 360, 400 up to those 500 hertz range, then that's definitely something to maybe consider, I think, in that regard. All right, so yeah, both of those. The AQDP, of course, is already out, and it's even hit some promotions, which have made it, I think, even more appealing. The 500 hertz is going to inherently be even more expensive, so it'll really come down to, one, do you really want, like I said, that more semi-gloss based approach, and whether or not there might be some of the other spec that might be tied into that model that you feel would be kind of advantageous to you to kind of consider. So I think right now, yeah, you don't have to stress. That's still a very good monitor that you have, but I think those are two sensible options to consider. I would recommend, though, maybe considering maybe looking at the 27-inch 4K, because again, if you're doing a lot of daily driving where this is not just gaming, but you're also using it for general desktop use, I think I might not necessarily consider going up to a higher refresh rate, but getting the better pixel density performance, right, of going to the 4K at 27 inches from even the daily driver, because it just looks so much sharper, especially if you're playing more of a myriad type of games. Okay. I was thinking the memory support would be better on X670 than, on X870 than X670. So actually, we talked about this in our prior live stream originally for the launch of X870. Overall, X670's maturity has actually seen just about the same type of overall, I'd say, current state as X870, because the AGISA updates and the MRC coding that we're generally doing is going to be generally brought over to those motherboards as well. Now, there is always a little bit of a fundamental difference, because when we design x870, we might be taking maybe some advanced trace optimization layout enhancements that we might have learned, right, that might give us a little bit better favorability. Also, technically, we knew that there was going to potentially be support for like CU DIMMs, so we did some optimizations to be able to run even higher DRAM frequency support on those platforms. So technically, right now, CU DIMMs have already been validated on x870, but they haven't been validated on x670. So you're correct in terms that there is some potential, I'd say, improvement, but I would say overall that the board topology is still quite good already on x670, that shouldn't generally be your limiting factor. I would say where there's only a clearer difference of this would actually not be on the ProArt motherboard, but on select other RG models that have the Nitro path design on x870. So we did have select x870 models, like if you would probably compare something that would be similar in pricing to the ProArt motherboard, but on the RG side would be like the x870E. Here we have this design that we developed called Nitro Path, and Nitro Path was an actual change to the way that we handled the actual DRAM topology design. And in that design, that actually allows us to have better actually signal scaling performance, right? So even withstanding, if you took the same CPU, right, from that board to this motherboard, one with Nitro Path, without Nitro Path, the Nitro Path board will generally offer a better level of stability and a better level of scaling, if that's something you're really interested in. But again, you have to probably really be targeting higher frequency kits. You'd have to be looking at CUDIM based kits, or you'd have to be looking at it, say, at least 7600 to 8000 MT based kits. If you're one of those people that's focused on thinking that the only value with an AMD is to be looking at 6000 MT and that's it, you're not going to see a difference. There's no point to you consider this. I don't agree with that logic, because it has been shown that depending on the workload that you're running and depending on the DRAM configuration, the subtimings you're running, you can definitely see that you could get better performance if you go to higher DRAM frequencies. But you do have to consider your configuration, the memory that you're running, and all those different factors. So again, if you're going to run higher frequency configurations, so 76, 78, 8000 plus CU DIMMs configurations, then yes, potentially moving over to an x870 board, I would recommend one that would also have the Nitro Path based design would be favorable. But going from the ProArt to the ProArt is going to be pretty similar. There might be a marginal improvement, but overall, I wouldn't say that you should readily expect that. Also, if you haven't updated your AGISA, the AGISA does make a big difference, because there have been updates in terms of the port table. The last thing I will make that a note that some people don't realize is that really the memory density configurations are going to be quite a bit more important. So if we take a look at something like, let's look at the port table, a lot of people don't realize that depending on the DRAM configurations that you go with, that is what's going to dictate the scaling performance. So an example here, if we go to our CPU, and we then take a look at, it's oddly enough, it's under connectivity. I don't know why it's under connectivity. But you can take a look here at the max memory speeds. You can see right here that you have something that says 2x1 and then 2x2. So what this is referring to is essentially slots per channel and DIMMs per channel, right? So this is what's called the port table, and this is the memory table in terms of how the memory controller works. So you can actually see that when you run even 4 DIMMs, even if they're single rank DIMMs, right? So it's actually significantly more strenuous to the memory controller than it would be only running 2 DIMMs. You can see officially the memory spec from AMD considerably goes down. 5200 is the baseline spec, but the moment you even go to 4 DIMMs, you're going to automatically drop all the way down to 3600. That's inherent because of the way that the memory controller works in terms of the memory. Now, there are some things on the motherboard side, like I said, that we can attempt to do to sometimes improve the margin, whether it's through auto rules or through topology refinement, through a couple of different ways that we can help to maximize the scaling that you can see. But unequivocally, if you care about scaling in terms of frequency, you always are going to favor running to run a 2 DIMM configuration, and ideally a single ranked configuration, not a dual rank configuration. You can see dual rank right here still actually has a fairly similar result in terms of 2 DIMMs, but overall still dual rank memory configurations are going to scale generally lower than they would from a single rank configuration. So pretty much it goes single rank is first. You ideally want to target either 24 gigabyte kits or 48 gigabyte kits or 32 gigabyte kits, right? The 24 and 48 are non-binary memory configurations, and then your 32 gigabyte are going to be your standard kits, right? When you go into 64 gig configurations, those are going to, of course, be dual rank based memory, and that's where you start to see more challenges. Also, of course, if you can, don't ever mix dual kits, right? And then try to load a profile, because that's also where people run into pain points, because they assume, well, it's 2 of the same kits, but you don't realize that the profiles and the timings were designed for those 2 DIMMs, not for 4 DIMMs. So that's when auto rules and other things sometimes have to come into play to kind of try to balance that out, but you still might require some manual tuning because you're trying to force a configuration that was never designed for that configuration, right? It is more challenging to find native 4-DIMM kits. They do exist out there, but if you're going to go with a 4-DIMM kit configuration, you ideally want to try to find a native 4-DIMM kit. If not, if you're going to take 2 sets of DIMMs and put them together, then you do have to consider that you might have to manually do some timing configuration to get. Let me go ahead and see here. ASUS North America, for greater high capacity memory support, would X870 be better than X670 if using 4 modules? So I think I just kind of talked about all of that. Overall, it's actually pretty similar. The max memory validation support that we've already defined is pretty much equal between the two, although technically X870 we've already certified it for CU DIMMs. So there's now ultra density CU DIMM based configurations that have already been made available. So in that regard, technically if you wanted to be able to run 4 DIMMs and even higher density configurations, X870 would be favorable, especially if you're going to go with CU DIMMs, because we've done validation for 128 gigabyte and even 256 gigabytes. And if you're using CU DIMMs, because the CU DIMMs actually have better scaling, it gets really interesting because you're going to be able to run much higher frequencies than you were able to achieve with traditional DDR5 memory in those ultra dense memory configurations. We actually did some really cool co-work with some of the DRAM partners specifically for these ultra high density configurations, where you can utilize our AMP memory technology. So let me actually do keep in mind though, this has been officially backported to 600 series, but I would say 600 series, there might be a little bit of a reduction compared to the 800 series, but technically both of these are possible. But let's actually look at some of the numbers right here. So actually, we posted about this previously in our PCDIY community group when we launched these updates towards the beginning of the year. So right now, you can see we have this AMP3 technology, and you can see that previously, if you were running the default, right, you were going to do the 4x64s, right? So that would be a 256 gigabyte kit configuration. You would only be able to do 3200 MT. But you can see now with the new AMP3 functionality, and keep in mind, you would want to use the AMP certified kits to ideally be able to kind of leverage this higher scaling, because we have to do kind of specific tuning for certain kind of IC packages and a couple of other parameters, right? You can see we have a big jump up, right? 32 to 5200. And then from here, you can also still see that in the 2DIMM configuration, still going with high density, right? Because this would be 128 gigs, which in the past you would do with only 4 DIMMs, but now you can do within 2 DIMMs. You can see that we can get up to 6800 MT. So that's pretty impressive. The CU DIMMs also allow for some really interesting configurations within this regard. So definitely, I would say you can still look to have a really good experience. I would recommend that since you already have the motherboard, if you want, try this out. Try to see what the newest configuration is with these corresponding kit configurations and see if you can get the result you want before kind of making that jump to transition over the whole motherboard. Could there potentially be an edge? Yes, but like I said, I think that the greater edge would be going from X670 to an X870 with Nitro path, right? Especially if you're going to go with like a 2DIMM configuration. But as a whole right now, you could already see, like I said, an uplift going within an ultra high density configuration, even on X670, just by making sure to leverage something like AMP3, the new UEFI BIOS, and then looking at the correct kit configurations. Okay. All right. All right. I'm going to go ahead and give it 5 minutes, and then we're going to wrap things up if we don't see any other questions that kind of come up within the stream. So let's go ahead and just see if we have any last questions that pop up here. If not, it's been great touching base with you guys. As always, if you guys have any other questions, you can feel free to drop them into the comments section, and I'll do my best to go ahead and check out the feed over the next coming days, and we'll respond there in the comments. Or like I said, you can visit us in our ASUS PCDIY community. That's linked in the YouTube description. Our Lee Meisner, our community manager, can help to field your questions there. I occasionally might be popping up in there, but we also have a great community of other builders and enthusiasts that can help to answer your questions and give you insights into everything from overclocking to build recommendations to all kinds of other things. And of course, if you're looking for the latest and greatest information regarding product releases, we'll definitely get you covered there in that community space as well. Okay. All right, let's see if we get any last questions that come up there. If not, we're going to get ready to kind of close things out. refresh here, see if we got any other questions that might have popped up. Okay, doesn't look like any new questions. So I think with that, we're gonna probably get ready to wrap it up. Go ahead and quickly just see here if I saw anything else pop up. All right, guys. All right, so I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up. So with that, guys, ZZ Utopia. Generally, I try to do it weekly. This year we haven't had as many just because we've had some internal transitions and items that limited to that. But generally, I usually try to do a weekly stream because we actually have something that we call the ASUS MPI, which is the new product introduction. We almost launch new products almost on a weekly basis. Some of them might not always be, let's say, like our highest end products, right? But we might have maybe new additions to our tough gaming lineup, maybe some new monitors, maybe some new motherboards. There could be new peripherals, new routers, all kinds of different stuff. And so every week we try to help to at least cover the new products that we're coming out to market with, give updates on other prior announcements. Sometimes I do like feature overviews or kind of on hands kind of demos or things like that. And we also generally try to have our PCDIY Builder Spotlight, which is where community members can submit their builds to actually be shown here on actually stream, and where we talk about the kind of the cool builds, and we highlight the actual builders through their actual survey form that they do when they submit their systems as part of the PCDIY Builder Spotlight. So I'm hoping to try to kind of re-kick off the normal schedule that we had previously in 2024. So if that holds true, hopefully it happens every week. If not, then I would say at a minimum probably every other week. But the best way is, of course, if you're subscribed to the PCDIY YouTube channel right now, the ASUS North America channel, you'll of course get notifications when we do set off that. We always do it. Generally, if we're going to do it, it's going to be on Fridays. Usually around 3 p.m. is going to be our weekly stream. But if you're also part of the PCDIY community, we'll also give you advance notice on when we're going to be actually doing the streams there as well. So you can make sure to keep up to date at either one of those two spaces, either joining us in the PCDIY community space or making sure that you're subscribed to the ASUS North America YouTube channel. So with that, guys, fantastic, man. Thank you guys so much. Best of luck with your guys' builds. Thanks for joining us for this week's stream. And as always, take care, take it easy, and best of luck with your builds. You guys take care. Bye-bye.